The title of today's meeting is Exploring the Prevalence of Extremity Pain of Spinal Source. And we've got one paper. You should have the paper. The title is A Study Exploring the Prevalence of Extremity Pain of Spinal Source. Richard Rosedale is the lead author. And just to get a feel for the room, we've got some poll questions. And I'm going to start the first question, which is basically, who are you? Clinician, student clinician, coach trainer, student coach trainer. Go ahead and click the button and we'll get a feel for the room. Looks like a nice split. Clinician, student clinician. Cool. 44%. So there's what we got. Got some clinicians, got some students, got some coaches, and some student coaches, student trainers. Cool. So we got a nice mix. All probably have dealt with, or either yourself or one of your clients have dealt with some symptoms such as this. And so that's the next question. Have you managed patients or clients who have extremity pain that was determined to be of spinal source? And got some yeses, got some nos. Nice little split there. I think it'll be good experience for everyone to talk about. So maybe 2/3 say yes. Lastly, have you experienced pain that was determined to be of spinal source? Almost 50-50. So again, it would be a good experience for everybody to talk about, at least kind of bring everything together. Give me 1 second here. I'm trying to unmute Kevin. Maybe I messed something up. Hey, Kevin, are you able to talk? Whoops. Hey, Kevin, sign out and sign back in. I made you a presenter, but I screwed it up. All right, let's dig into this. But before we do, remember our Journal Club motto, which is, these meetings are conducted in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth without fondness of dispute or desire of victory. So I'm going to just kind of dig into this paper a little bit. And, Kevin, you there?
Yeah, you can hear me?
What's up, man? Yeah, we got something up in the beginning, but it's good to hear your voice. I missed you.
Yeah.
Okay. And as always, we are joined by Kevin Mcnamara, who is a resident at Johns Hopkins. What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. How you doing tonight?
Good. So I'm going to roll through this paper and just kind of dig into just give an overview of what it was about, and then we can dig into the conversation. So the problem that they kind of outlined in the introduction was a lack of data reporting prevalence of pain of spinal source from different extremity joints. So the argument here is you have somebody come into the clinic complaining of shoulder, elbow, arm, hip, thigh, knee, ankle pain. The pain is in the extremities. That's where they're experiencing the pain. The argument is that where they experience the pain is not necessarily the source of the pain. And as they list in the introduction, there's a paucity of data for extremity pain of spinal source in a number of joints, like the ankle or the wrist have no data behind them. There's other locations like the shoulder that reports a prevalence of 10 to 27% of shoulder pain has been determined to be of spinal source, so not just something happening in the shoulder, but it's coming from the spine and it's a referred pain to the shoulder. So they kind of lack they stated the problem as a lack of prevalence data on different areas of the body. And so they had a couple of objectives. One was to establish prevalence or proportion of patients with extremity pain that responds to spinal intervention. Then would be assumed that if they respond to the spinal intervention, then the pain was of spinal source. So they wanted to determine what proportion of some of those joints and areas of the body that don't have any data behind them, like the arm or the elbow or the wrist or the ankle and foot. And then the second objective, how many cases of people coming into the clinic with pain in those areas is it actually of spinal source? And then the second objective was, do spinal source extremity problems managed with an MDT approach, which we'll sure talk about because that's pretty much what the paper was outlining. Do spinal source extremity problems managed with an MDT approach respond more or less favorably compared to extremity only problems? So somebody comes in with hip pain. If it's determined, let's say you have two people that come in with hip pain. One of those people, it was determined that hip pain is actually of spinal source, and the other, it was determined that no, that the main driver is coming from the hip. They feel it in the hip. It's a hip problem. Do those two groups, does one tend to have more favorable outcomes than the other? And so that was the second objective that they looked at. The design, it was a prospective cohort study with a decent number of participants because it was a multi-center trial. So they had, I think, 2 centers in Canada, 1 in New Zealand, and 1 in the United States, with a total of 322 participants. And so basically what they did is they took people who presented to these clinics with extremity pain in various joints and areas of the body and included them in the study if it was not interpreted by either them or the referring physician as being pain of spinal source. So they excluded somebody if the physician said, yes, this patient's having knee pain, but it's actually coming from their spine. They included them in the study if the physician said, yes, they're having knee pain, please treat for knee pain. They were included because part of the study was assessing whether or not that is accurate or not. So, which I thought was interesting. And what they did then, once they were included in the study, they established kind of a baseline testing of joints and looked for concordant signs for the extremity pain. So let's say they were having shoulder pain. They looked at shoulder range of motion and they measured that, or shoulder strength, or if it was knee pain, they were looking at pain with squatting or step ups, things like that. So they basically created some type of baseline, some type of orthopedic testing baseline that they would then put somebody through an MDT protocol, which MDT stands for Mechanical Diagnosis and Therapy, and it's coming from the McKenzie School, of which I have not taken a course, but I've several of my CIs in PT school were MDT certified and coworkers and things like that. So I've had exposure to it. But essentially, they would basically put somebody through an MDT protocol of repeated spinal motions. So you're having hip pain. Why don't you do? They didn't outline this exactly, so I'm just kind of extrapolating. Why don't you do 10 forward flexions as far as you can, as far as you're comfortable going, and then retest your concordant sign or your baseline test and see if there was a change in your symptoms. Or for the shoulder, you're having shoulder pain, do 10 right cervical lateral flexions, retest shoulder range of motion, see if there's a change in your pain. And if there was a change in the baseline testing or concordant sign, then that person was put into the pain of spinal source group, extremity pain of spinal source group. If there was no change, then they were allocated into extremity pain group. And also, anybody here, Kevin, if I'm butchering this, just correct me. And as we go forward, for anybody in the meeting, there should be there's a way to kind of raise your hand or to alert us that you want to chime in into the discussion. I can unmute you, and then you can talk. If you don't want to speak up verbally, you can type a question into the chat, and we'll read that off as a discussion point. And if you just want to be a fly on the wall, that's cool too. So I wanted to throw that idea out there. They didn't really outline, if somebody was allocated into the extremity group, they didn't really outline what exactly those MDT protocols are. And I'm not super familiar with them, but they did give an example. So for example, if the classification was deemed, if they came in with elbow pain and they did repeated spinal motion, some type of cervical movement, and it didn't change their elbow pain, they were allocated to extremity pain group. And let's say they were given the MDT classification of contractile dysfunction in the direction of wrist extension, then the home exercise program would be repeated resisted wrist extension as a loading strategy. So again, if anybody is MDT certified in this meeting, it would be nice to have a discussion if you can chime in, because I am not. Kevin, have you been to MDT courses?
I have not. Similar to you, I've had some CIs that had gone through and were certified in it. But just right out the gate, I'll tell you right now, my understanding is pretty rudimentary of the system itself.
Okay, so here we are. We're two people running this meeting who have no idea, who have not taken an MDT course. But I can say that, but it doesn't have to go. Even if it just stopped at repeated motions, I think this is still an interesting discussion to have. And especially with their findings that we'll go into. But basically so they're allocating people in these groups, and that was part of their first objective, is just to see how many people who come in with elbow pain are actually coming in with elbow pain of a spinal source. What percentage of people are in spinal source, or it's actually their elbow, and on down. So that was objective one. And then for the second objective, they measured pain with the MPRS, pre and post numeric pain rating scale. I'm going to pull up the outcome measures here. They measured function of the upper extremity and the lower extremity pre and post with use of the upper extremity functional index and the lower extremity functional scale. They did a psychosocial screening for delayed recovery, so to kind of try to screen out those who were maybe more prone to a longer rehab process or more prone to chronic, something becoming chronic, with the Grabow Musculoskeletal Pain Screening Questionnaire, which I'm not familiar with. Kevin, are you familiar with that?
No, that one I had to look up. I'd never seen that one before.
Yeah. And then they used, they measured the patient's self-perceived change with the global rating of change scale, and they measured that at discharge. So they had 3 or 4 outcome measures that they were using once the people were allocated into the two groups. That's how they were measuring progress after intervention. They didn't really, the length of intervention, or they did number of sessions, which on average for the extremity source group was 6.4 average sessions, and for the spinal source group, 5.5 average sessions. So I'm not sure how long those lengths of care were. I don't think they outlined that.